And please join me in welcoming a man who knows quite a bit about big thoughts, Bill Bryson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Leland, for those kind words, and Professor Itagaki before you. I shall be blushing all week. I'm very, very grateful for all those kind words. And thank you, above all, for letting me be part of this supremely happy occasion. I can't tell you how honored and delighted I am to be here. I arrived only yesterday in Gambia, but already I've had the most wonderful time and have been made to feel extremely welcome. So thank you all very, very much indeed. Now, I'm especially grateful to you for allowing me to pretend for a day or two to be a really important person. You know, when you're an author, by and large, you don't cause a lot of excitement in the world. At least at my level of celebrity, most people have never even heard of you. So any recognition at all is very welcome, believe me. I'm very grateful for it. Now, because many of you won't know quite who I am, I should perhaps begin by telling you that I grew up in Iowa, but went off to England to live as a young man and have spent most of my adult life there, which is why I have a slightly funny accent. And because I've lived in England for a long time, I have a somewhat higher profile there, and very occasionally I do get recognized on the streets in London and places like that. But I've never, ever been recognized in my own country, the United States. And I've always secretly wished that just once someone would come up to me on a visit home and say, "Excuse me, are you that wonderful author Bill Bryson, whose books have given me such pleasure and intellectual nourishment for all these many years, and which I give generously as gifts at christenings, birthdays, and all government-mandated holidays?" But that has never happened at all, nothing even like it. And then quite recently, I was in Vail, Colorado, and it did actually seem finally to happen. Now, the reason I was in Vail is because my wife and I were there to visit our youngest son, Sam, who's not much older than you. He graduated from a college in England a year or so ago, but then took advantage of his American passport to go to Vail and get a job as a junior ski instructor. He's quite a good skier. And so he went to Vail, and he's having the time of his life, as you might well imagine. He's sharing an apartment with some really nice guys, and he's made some good friends, and he's having a terrific time. As those of you graduating today will soon discover, being out in the real world can be a lot of fun. So anyway, a few weeks ago, my wife and I decided to go to Vail to visit Sam because we're quite fond of him, and we just wanted to see how he was doing, make sure he was okay. So we flew to Vail, and we met his roommates and all these nice kids that he's living with and all his friends, and it was terrific. We were seeing him as much as we could, but he was still working during the day, so we had to go off and kind of fill the days ourselves. And on about the third or fourth day that I was in Vail, I was just shuffling around downtown Vail looking in store windows, and somebody called out to me from across the way. He said, "Hey, Bill, Mr. Bryson." And I turned around, and this young man was advancing towards me with a big smile on his face and his hand extended. He obviously wanted to shake my hand, obviously recognized me. I was so thrilled. I can't begin to tell you. This had been waiting years and years for this to happen. He came up, I shook his hand, and I said, "I'm so pleased to meet you, but how did you know who I am?" And he said, "I'm one of your son's roommates. We had dinner with you 2 nights ago." So when I say thank you very, very much for making me feel important, I really, really mean it, believe me. And thank you above all for really the great honor of delivering today's commencement address. Now, commencement, when you think about it, is really kind of an odd word for this exercise in which we're all engaged this morning, because commencement clearly implies a kind of beginning. Whereas, in fact, those of you graduated today have actually been around for quite a long time. You must all surely be well into your 20s by now, which means that you've already used up about a quarter of your life. So if this is just the beginning for you, you're really pretty slow starters here in this part of Ohio. And of course, we all know that that is obviously not the case. So what we're really marking here today, I think, is not a commencement, but a continuation. You're all going to continue being exactly what you are already, which is to say, of course, astute, enterprising, stylish, good-natured, clean-living, dazzlingly intelligent, generally adorable young men and women with lots of big thoughts. And all that will continue when you leave here today. None of that will change. The only thing that is going to change is that you are now going to start paying a lot of your own bills. And because you're also... And because you are all so gratifyingly complete and well-formed, nothing I say to you today is actually necessary, frankly. You are all going to lead valuable, productive, incredibly exciting lives, whether I say another word to you or not. Nonetheless, it is my solemn duty, born of long tradition, to offer you some worthwhile advice, and I am very happy to do so. Indeed, I've been preparing for this moment for years. It so happens that I am called upon from time to time to speak at ceremonies such as this. So I have been able, over a very long period, to develop and refine a list of 10 sound pieces of advice, which I bring out whenever requested. Now, some of them may seem just a little random, but I can assure you that they are the result of a lot of very careful thought. So here, without ado, and in no particular order, are my 10 tips for leading an even more rich and rewarding life than you are about to lead anyway. 1. Take a moment from time to time to remember that you are alive. Now, I know that sounds a trifle self-evident, but it is astounding, really, how little time we generally take to remark upon the singular and gratifying fact of our own existence. By the most extraordinary stroke of luck, an infinitesimal portion of all the matter in the universe came together some 20 or so years ago to make you. And for the tiniest moment in the great span of creation, you have the incomparable privilege to exist. For endless eons, there was no you. And before too terribly long, you will cease to be again. And in between, you have this wonderful opportunity to see and feel and think and do. That this good fortune has fallen to you, out of all the potential human beings that might have been created, is almost staggeringly improbable. Think of all the successful pairings of kindred souls that were necessary to get you here today. You are the product of an unbroken chain of reproductive success going back more than 3 billion years to the very birth of life on Earth. How extraordinary is that? Every one of your ancestors since the dawn of time has been attractive enough to find a mate, robust enough to reproduce, and sufficiently blessed by fate and circumstances to live long enough to do so. Not one of them on either side was squashed, devoured, stranded, starved, stuck fast, upstaged by a more glamorous suitor, or otherwise deflected from its life's quest of delivering a tiny charge of genetic material to the right partner at the right moment to perpetuate the only possible sequence of hereditary combinations that could result, eventually, astoundingly, and all too briefly, in you. Now, I don't wish to belabor the point. Thank you. I don't wish to belabor the point, but your life is an incredibly lucky thing, and you shouldn't let a day pass that you don't rejoice in having it. In the whole history of the universe, there has never been, there will never be again be another you. So congratulations. Well done. You really are quite special. 2, but not that special. There are 7 billion other people on this planet, each one of them just as important, just as central to the great scheme of things as you are. Don't ever make the embarrassing, unworthy mistake of thinking yourself more vital or significant, more innately worthy than anyone else. You're not. 3. Be happy. Really happy, more or less all the time. You have a million things to be happy about. You're young and full of energy. You have more hair on your head than in your ears or nostrils. And that won't necessarily last forever, believe me. You've been impeccably educated. You live in a time of peace. Sarah Palin is never going to be president. So count your blessings and be glad of them. 4, never sneak up on people from behind and startle them in the belief that it's amusing. It's not. 5, be good. In fact, be more than good. Be compassionate, be kind, and particularly be kind to people who are worse off than you, which you will find in life is most people. And say thank you a lot to everyone who deserves it. all the time, but especially today. For every one of you graduating this morning, you have not only done a lot of hard work to get here, but at times, I dare say, have been a lot of hard work. The fact that you are here in such a glorious and accomplished state is testament in large part to the support and love and saintly patience of a lot of people. So be sure to say thank you to parents and roommates and professors and friends and siblings and everyone else who helped to make you become the fabulous specimen of intellectual dynamism that we see here before us this morning. 6, value the past. Learn from history. Everyone always says this, but no one ever does it. Well, you should start. We can learn an amazing amount from the past. I had this brought home to me quite forcefully not too long ago when I made a visit to Durham Cathedral in the north of England. Now, Durham Cathedral, as you may know, is a vast and magnificent Norman structure. It is one of the world's most beautiful and greatest and most inspiring edifices. And it's been standing proudly above the ancient city of Durham for some 900 years. And I was there to interview the cathedral architect, a very nice man named Christopher Downs, for some research I was doing. And at the time of my visit, much of the outside of the building was covered in scaffolding, and workmen were up on the scaffolding, busy replacing many of the cathedral's stones. Now, building stones, I learned from Christopher Downs, are not more or less eternal, as I'd always vaguely supposed, but are actually surprisingly fragile and susceptible to weathering and acid rain and things like that. And so they begin to deteriorate after as little as 150 years or so. And when that happens, Christopher Downs told me, the masons carefully take out the old stone and slot in a new one. And I asked him, why a new stone? Why not just take out the existing stone and rotate it to a fresh face? That way you'd get, four cracks from each stone. And he looked at me as if I was kind of wondrously naive and uninformed and said, because they aren't blocks of stone at all. They're just, the stones in Durham Cathedral are actually only about 6 inches thick. Durham, it turns out, like all great medieval buildings that we've ever seen, is actually a giant deception. The walls of the cathedral are 6.5 feet thick, but that's just 6.5 inches of outer stone wall, and 6.5 inches of inner stone wall, and in between is 5.5 feet of cavity. And that cavity, in the time the cathedral was built, was filled with rubble and hardcore and horsehair and broken bricks and whatever else came to hand. All of it held together with a kind of gloopy cement-like mortar. So Durham Cathedral, and this is true of all the world's great cathedrals and castles and palaces and all the other buildings from the ancient past that we've long admired, is really just a great heap of rubble. Now, to me, this was astounding, but what was even more extraordinary to me, and more relevant to the point I'm working towards here, was to learn that because that gloopy mortar was contained between 2 impermeable outer layers, air couldn't get to it. And so it took an immensely long time, some 40 years or so to be precise, to dry out. And as it dried out, the building gently settled, which meant that the builders of the cathedral had to build door jambs and lintels and window frames and all the other horizontal surfaces at slightly acute angles like this, so that they would settle eventually into the correct alignments. And that's exactly what happened. After 40 years of slow motion sagging, all the straight surfaces on the building sank into perfect alignment. And they have remained like that, not deviating by a millimeter for 900 years. Now, to me, coming from the Midwest of America, that was just astounding. Not just that people 900 years ago could build something so sumptuous and impressive, but that they would take such pains in order to secure a particular degree of perfection that most of them would never even live to see. We don't do that anymore. It's hard to think of anything that humans do now in any realm of endeavor that even fractionally matches that kind of ambition and imagination and commitment to glory. Now, I'm not suggesting that those of you graduating today should devote your lives to building medieval cathedrals, but I am suggesting that you rediscover some of that medieval perspective, and not just for the sake of architecture and the built environment, but for the sake of the planet altogether. If we're to have an Earth worth living on 80 or 90 or 100 years from now, it will be because your generation finally wised up to the fact that what we do today inevitably influences what happens tomorrow, that our future will always be someone else's present. It's time we resume the practice of passing on to future generations things that will inspire and delight and gratify them, and not just a basket full of intractable problems. I'm making it your assignment, as this generation's smartest and most promising young people, to rediscover the simple act of being courteous and perhaps even inspirational to generations yet unborn. 7, always buy my books in hardback as soon as they come out. 8, whatever it is you hanker to do in life, do it. At least give it a try. If it is your earnest wish to be a celebrated ballerina or an Olympic swimmer or to sing at Carnegie Hall, go for it. Even though everyone is tactfully pointing out to you that you can't sing a note or that no one has ever won the 100-meter dash with a personal best time of 27 seconds, do it anyway if that's your dream. At least try. There's nothing worse than getting to my age and saying, I could have been a shortstop for the Boston Red Sox, but my dad wanted me to go into accountancy. Tell your dad to go into accountancy. You climb Everest. 9, don't boast. It doesn't become you. Indeed, it doesn't get you anywhere. Nobody will ever say, oh, I really like Bob and Amy. They have such a fantastic sense of their own importance. Believe me, the only good way to get people to realize just how wonderful you are is to let them discover it for themselves. And finally, 10, and if you remember nothing else from today, do remember this: when called upon to speak in public, always keep your remarks brief. Thank you very, very much. Have wonderful lives. Thank you.